Hello and welcome to another episode of Echoes of the Past. My name is Zachary Graulich. I'm the Assistant Director of Education here at HMTC, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Howard Maier, who is a longtime board member here at HMTC and is one of our former chairs. So thank you so much, Howard, for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Zach.
Of course. So today we're going to be talking about a very special artifact that we have in our collection. You yourself donated it. So for all of those who are listening and watching via YouTube and can see the actual stream, you'll see right here on display we have a yellow star right in front of us, which is the artifact in question. So Howard, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing a little bit about the artifact and what its connection is with your family?
Sure. My pleasure. Many people have heard the term Kristallnacht. What that term means is that in November of 1938, all the synagogues in Germany, as well in Austria, in one coordinated event, the synagogues were destroyed and fires were created in many of them. Firefighters looked on. It was a planned attack on Jews. And many Jewish men, either adult male or teenagers, were rounded up by the Nazis and put in concentration camps. My grandfather, Julius, was one of those individuals who was rounded up, and that star was put on him in Dachau, the concentration camp Dachau. And he remained there for 5 months without word going to the rest of the family of how he was doing, and then one day he was just released. Why the Nazis decided to release Jews at that time, we don't know. But in any event, Kristallnacht was at the end of 1938, November, and he was released in early part of 1939. And Jews at that time had to wear their star. So he left that camp still wearing that star. A number of years ago, my Aunt Gertrude, who was like my second mother to me, my mother passed away early in life, and so Aunt Gertrude and I became very close. She knew of the work that we were doing here at the Holocaust Center, and she said, I think you can find a better use for me than keeping this in a drawer. And that's how it came to us here on Long Island.
Incredible. So do you know then, I suppose, the rest of the story for your grandfather and the rest of the family once he was released? Kind of, how does the story go from there?
Kristallnacht in general was a huge wake-up call to the Jews living in Germany. Jews in southern Germany, where my grandparents were much more inclined to take the warnings from the Nazis to try to leave. The Nazis had several different ways to get Jews out. They didn't want the Jews there either. So my uncle, this is now my grandfather Julius's son, was in a farm program because countries outside of Germany would accept Jews who were trained as farmers. So Uncle Larry left Germany that way. Many families realized they had to get out. And if they didn't realize it before Kristallnacht, that was a major wake-up call. It's a very difficult decision for parents to send your children out. My aunt, the youngest of the 5 in the family, was sent to England in what's called Kindertransport. England accepted 10,000 young German, male and female, and they went there via train, often usually unaccompanied, and that's how Aunt Anne got there. My mother was a little too old for Kindertransport, so she was sent to England by my grandparents as a domestic. Here she was a young teenager, and she had to become a domestic in someone's home, which she did for 3 years.
Wow. And do you know what that experience was like for her, for 3 years to have a completely different life?
She didn't really talk about it that much. When I would get her to discuss the past, a lot of individuals who escaped Germany or escaped Europe in general really didn't want to talk about what happened to them. My parents were much more talking about the positives in the United States, all the freedoms that they had. And so most of what my younger sister and I heard growing up was how wonderful America is, how they have the ability to vote, as an example, make simple decisions. When my mother talked about the past, she shared that things like her bicycle were confiscated. We hear that Jews were not allowed to sit in public areas in a public park. She said that she was terminated in school after 8th grade. So all those rights were taken away. And I think when she got to England, I think it was the first degree of life is better than what it had been, even though she was there all alone.
Yeah.
And she had to learn a trade. So eventually she made it to the United States, but I think the bigger comment that I have here is how difficult it was on the parents to decide what to do with each and every child in the family.
Yeah, absolutely. You have these parents and these families who are just desperate to save every single one of their children by any means. And, thank God for initiatives like the Kindertransport. But as you said, that could only save so many children and only ones that were of a certain age. And your mother, for example, did not qualify. Correct. So they had to figure out different means of saving their children. And unfortunately, as we know, all too many were not able to do so. Getting back to the artifact, because it is such an incredible piece. It's one of only 3 of these authentic yellow stars that we have in our archives here, one of only 3. I want to specifically talk about, I guess, the meaning of this artifact for you. I mean, I'm sure that, given your experience here and your connection to this place, it was probably a relatively easy decision for you to entrust the museum with it. But at the same time, you were giving up something that is so near and dear to your family.
I think it's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it to that degree, but you're absolutely correct. This is the one grandparent that I got to know. I mentioned that Uncle Larry was a farmer and Gertrude was his wife. They had a family, had a farm in upstate New York, and Grandpa Julius, we called him Opa Julius, lived with them. And I lived nearby in the village of Norwich. The farm was outside of Norwich, New York. And as a youth, I worked on that farm, helping bale hay and milk cows and all those kinds of things, along with Opa Julius. So I really got to know him. He's the one grandparent that I can remember. On my father's side, when we were younger, the other grandparents lived with us briefly, but I was pretty young, so I don't remember that side of the family as well.
So having that relationship with your Opa Julius, I assume, did any of those conversations happen about the past, or was he pretty closed off like your mom was?
He was more closed off than she was. I think when you go through this as adults, he was a successful business person. His business actually was raising cattle and then selling cattle. He owned some land that the cattle were raised on. And also what it did to the family, how it just broke up a family. They were living on the outskirts of a small city in Bavaria by the name of Karlsruhe. And life all of a sudden is not all of a sudden. All of this was beginning to happen. As I mentioned, my wife's, my mother's bicycle was taken away, and all those kinds of things. So, as parents, seeing those things happen not just to yourself and your wife, but your children, had to be extremely difficult for he and his wife.
Yeah. So even though the family didn't really necessarily talk about it, was it something that you were always aware of, or did it not come about till later in your life?
with Oppo Julius, we really did not talk about it. But you always knew your grandparents spoke primarily in German. My aunt and uncle, just like my parents, spoke with huge accents. And as children, you almost don't want to hear those accents.
Yeah.
You're in America now. Children often say cruel things like, don't speak German, speak English. And I remember at home, in this case, at Uncle Larry and Aunt Gertrude's home, German was primarily spoken when Oppo was around. And children didn't know German probably all that well in terms of conversation with him. So when you would do things with him, it would be farm-related things, or we would go picking berries with him.
So you really do have this special connection to him and, kind of by proxy, this artifact. And so I'd love to touch upon the work that you've done here at HMTC and why I would like to say your connection to this place and the work that you did here for so long, I guess, gave you that comfort level to, as I said earlier, entrust the organization, the museum, with something that you feel this connection to.
Absolutely. It's important for us to teach about the Holocaust to today's generations. And the best way to do it is really to try to have individuals speak about what happened to them. And that, of course, talking about our survivors, and there are fewer and fewer of our survivors. But the survivors can speak with a sense of, here's what we felt, here's what happened to us. Something like the star is a way of showing, here are the kinds of actions that were taken against us to dehumanize us. We had to physically wear this star to show all of the community that we were Jews, which is, are we leopards? Not are we, that you are a leopard. And so here, because we have so many people come to visit, whether it's youth, groups of students coming in youth programs, or the police program who come here, some of these artifacts, like the star, are just ways of helping people recognize what really happened back then.
Absolutely. And it's a tangible object. It's one thing for us to stand and talk about the Holocaust or history just in any sense. But when you have something authentic that, lived through this period of time, like this star did. I mean, imagine if this star could speak about what it witnessed, where it came from, what it saw. It's different, in my opinion, when you have something tangible that no one can deny. Because as we know, unfortunately, there are a lot of Holocaust deniers and distorters out there. But when you have something, material that you cannot, question, I think it creates an entirely different layer to the conversation.
Clearly, the Holocaust happened to people. All Holocausts and genocide happened to individuals. We often count numbers, how many people died during this Holocaust. And each individual had a life and a family. Here's a star that was worn by a survivor. So I'm not even thinking of the 6 or 7 million individuals who died during the Holocaust, but individuals who survived even had to wear stars, and the dehumanizing aspect of their lives that they went through.
Absolutely.
And which leads to the work that we attempt to teach here, is that the Holocaust didn't start with Auschwitz and the death camps, but it started with dehumanizing individuals who were, from the Nazis' perspective, different. Whether it was Jews or homosexuals, it was a campaign, propaganda, to show these individuals as outcasts, and wearing a star is one of those ways of putting those individuals into that leper category.
Exactly. So it's evident that you obviously feel extremely passionate about Holocaust education, which is why you're here and why you've been involved with HMTC for so long. I'd love to hear from you. How did you become first involved in HMTC?
Now, that's a long story. I think we're going to need a lot longer than a few minutes here. I'll just start by saying very quickly, my daughter came here in a youth, in a student session. She went to Friends Academy. And when she came back, she shared what she observed there. And coincidentally, my wife and I and a son had just been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington a week or so earlier. And we had very different opinions of what we had seen. And so I decided to come over here because I was not aware that we had a museum here. And I took a look around and said, I think I can help with some of the visualization and storytelling. My expertise is marketing, and so I thought that, and so I just offered my services to the chairman at the time, our founder, Boris Charton, and as they would say, the rest is history. I got pretty involved here.
Yes, to say the least. So, and here, now in 2025, you're still an active board member. You're an active chair of the museum committee here. So whenever it comes to any updates to the museum, artifact installations, things of that nature, you're obviously one of the key players involved. And so it's extremely special for me as, and one of the staff members here to have you on the podcast today to talk about something so special to your family. Because of course, I know that your family has this connection to the Holocaust, but getting to actually sit down and chat with you about what that connection truly is in detail, and knowing the history behind this artifact that, of course, I knew that we had in our collection, but to hear you explain the history behind it and the meaning for you is very, very special. And so, on behalf of me, I really appreciate, you and your role here at HMTC and the influence that you've had. You and I were just speaking before this episode about what this place was like, so long ago, and the work that you and everyone involved really, put into this place to get it to the place that it is today, where now we can proudly say that we're seeing over 30,000 students annually through them coming here, us going to schools, doing virtual presentations. I mean, I know that's such a difference from when you first got involved, and you are, one of the key people in, responsible for that type of change. So I'm sure for you, it must be incredible to see that growth over this time.
Thank you, Zach. Absolutely. The professionalism here is among the biggest changes, and you and our education director, Donna Rosenblatt, are a wonderful compliment to the leadership here. The fact that schools are sending their children in these growing numbers, especially during this period of heightened anti-Semitism, anti-Israel feelings. Our mission is more important than ever. The museum itself, yes, I do take pride in the fact that we now have a extremely meaningful, knowledgeable learning experience for youth, or when the adults come here, whether it's police, nurses, etc. So yes, I feel good about that, and I feel extremely good about the enhancements that have been made over the years.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Howard. I really, really appreciate your time. Of course, your generous donation, willing to have this as a part of our collection here, which without it, we wouldn't even be able to have this discussion, have this episode. And of course, thanks to your aunt who was able to, have the courage to give this item to you, knowing that it would be in good hands. Because again, if she hadn't done that, we wouldn't even have it today to speak about it. And it's like we spoke about earlier in this episode, the importance of these tangible artifacts to bring the humanity, as you said, to the Holocaust, that the Holocaust happened to people, to individuals, and to families. And these artifacts stand as a testament to that. So really, thank you so much, Howard.
Pleasure being here. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much as always. We really, really appreciate your support. To listen to any additional episodes of HMTV, you can find all the links and everything else available online at hmtcli.org.